Hello, so in the readings from this week, our first one was White Privilege by Peggy McIntosh. It talked about how white people are often taught to not recognize their privilege, as well as that those who have white privilege don't express it consciously. So I was taught that white people are the neutral or the default, which I know my group has discussed a lot, that we feel it's just kind of the default setting a lot of times in our conversations. The one thing that stood out to me most from this reading was the list of 26 conditions of privilege. And of those, the ones that I took note of most were the representation in things such as merchandise like Barbies, Band-Aids. That was one that I saw that just kind of stuck with me, because I know that was I feel like it was a couple years ago when they finally came out with the different colored ones, and that was kind of a hot button issue for a lot of people for some reason. Another few of the notable ones that were mentioned in the reading were the ability to have financial stability or reliability, such as getting a job or having a house, protection when they're walking down the street, or being able to rely on police and having more protections from our government, as well as being able to have free speech and be able to keep their jobs. It also talked about how ignorance keeps driving this oppression that we see in our country, just because people who have privilege, it's hard for them to talk about it and accept that they have it and try and change their ways, and it's easier for them to just stay ignorant to it, which kind of just keeps driving that one forward. For the second part of the reading, we had Defining Racism by Beverly Tatum. And in that reading, they talked mostly about how the information that is taught to us isn't from firsthand sources. It's like our parents didn't learn to be racist from instances usually. They learned it from their parents, who learned it from their parents. And another very common form that we see is media. And the book mentioned Peter Pan, which I realize now is super racist, but as a kid, when I was 6 or 7, it was one of my favorite movies. And looking back at it, it's just really horrible depictions of Native Americans in there. And I like that it added that one in, because I feel like that's a movie that a lot of us grew up on, and one that I personally loved. This reading also talked about how in many classrooms, racial topics aren't exactly taught because it's such a hard topic, especially when a lot of the professors are white. The people who make the curriculums are white. It's just easier for them to not talk about it and to paint white people as the heroes or the historical correct side. Even when I was in high school, I know I didn't have a lot of that. I got a good professor my last year, but that was really it. In that reading, it was also talked about internalized oppression, which I found really interesting. The internalized oppression, that's when individuals in an oppressed group view themselves in a similar light as the oppressors view them. And I feel depending on where you grew up, I can't really speak as a white person, but I feel if you grew up if you were a person, or if you're a BIPOC individual or someone in an oppressed group, you grew up around a lot of white people, you might have some of those internalized oppressions. I can't really speak on it though. Even the town I grew up in didn't have that many individuals that were in oppressed groups. We were just a bunch of white people. Another one is that I really think anyone can be racist towards any group of individuals. There's no I think we're all also racist in our own way, even if we don't consciously know it. We're all trying to change something about ourselves to be less racist and be better individuals. And then another thing was active and passive racism, which I feel we all kind of like had an idea of what that was. Like active is just kind of blatant in your face, and passive is kind of more of those microaggressions and the subconscious that people have, like those internalized ideals and just how they view other individuals. Then in the end, it kind of just said that like racism hurts everyone, and there's multiple ways that it can do that. It just kind of builds, and if one person says, if you keep building on the idea that one race is better than another, it just compiles, and it can just destroy how everyone lives and how everyone views each other. And then eventually, when you have the people who like are mixed race, I feel like it gives them a really bad identity crisis, because they're like, well, what am I then if I'm mixed? Am I less? That they would ask themselves, like, what does this make me then to society? And then it can also like cause a lot of issues for, like, if you're a business or something and you have a history of being like super racist, your clientele can just disappear, which not very good. I kind of like to see what other groups have and what everyone's ideas are of like how racism could hurt everyone, though. Yeah. Bye.